Perfect. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us today for a panel on post-COVID-19, is healthcare's new normal digital? My name is Stan Kichnowski. I'm director of the Digital Health Certification Program at Columbia Business School, and also chair of HitLab, a partner with LSX and this tremendous conference that they put on this week. With me, we have some extraordinary digital health leaders across the global healthcare ecosystem, including Jennifer Schneider, president of Livongo, Lisa Bookwalter, director of digital health at Twitter, director of health at Twitter, John Young, senior director of digital health for Eli Lilly, Mark Davies, the chief medical officer for EMEA for IBM Watson Health, and John Brownstein, the chief innovation officer for Boston Children's Hospital. With that, I wanted to let everyone in the audience know, please do feel free to send over your questions, raise your hands, etc. We have the all-star from LSX, Kieran, who'll be actually moderating this and sending us over questions. We want to make this a highly interactive panel so everyone can come away with at least 3 new learnings. That's always been my goal in teaching biomedical informatics and digital health over the last 30 years. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to queue them up on the platform that LSX has provided you. And with that, I wanted to have each of the panelists introduce themselves for about a minute or so to give everyone a little bit better understanding of what they do and how they do it. Also understand that all the panelists have agreed that they would love to be contacted by you either through LinkedIn or Twitter to further your networking opportunities for this tremendous week. But starting with that and using my Zoom screen with Lisa, we'll start with just a little bit about your background, Lisa.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Bookwalter, and I lead the health vertical at Twitter. I've been there exactly a year, and I went over to Twitter because I just think that the future of health and interacting both from a patient standpoint and an HCP standpoint is really in social, and I think Twitter is really leading that charge.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. And again, going down my Zoom screen, and Jenny, a little bit about your background.
Sure, thanks so much, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm Jenny Schneider, and I'm the president of Livongo. My background is I'm an internal medicine doctor and a health services researcher, so I always like to say a geeky doc or a doc who likes numbers. And Livongo's mission is empowering people with chronic conditions to live better and healthier lives. And I was drawn to the company nearly 6 years ago because I love this idea around leveraging data in the ecosystem to drive outcomes that we've seen done in other industries. I have type 1 diabetes, so I saw this from the patient and the doctor angle, and I was always surprised by the disconnect around what was really happening day-to-day living, and then you went into the doctor's office. My responsibilities at Livongo include overseeing our data science team, our product team, our engineering team, design team, clinical marketing, and setting our corporate strategy. So really excited kind of for this next phase to leap forward with Livongo, and we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, today. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jenny. And again, going down the Zoom screen in front of me, John, a little bit about yours.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is John Brownstein. I guess I wear 2 hats. One is a professor of biomedical informatics at Harvard Medical School and chief innovation officer at Boston Children's Hospital. My 2 worlds have somewhat collided with COVID in that my research is focused on emerging infectious diseases and surveillance of pandemics and outbreaks. And my role at Boston Children's is sort of digital transformation and bringing in tools like Livongo to support our patients. And so the intersection of sort of a pandemic that has broad sort of impact on the population, but then specifically on our patients and what the opportunities are to support them. So we'll get, hopefully get into some of those examples throughout this panel. So it's great to be here.
Super, fantastic. And Mark?
Yeah, so thanks, Stan, and thanks again for the opportunity to take part in this. So as you say, I'm Chief Medical Officer for Europe, Middle East and Africa across IBM and Watson Health. It's a great privilege to be in that role, which I've had for about 2.5 years now. If I have a passion, it's about the opportunity to redesign healthcare. I just happen to feel that having been a family physician for about 25 years, that healthcare is rather an important industry and cannot be the last industry to take get the benefit from digital transformation. So for me, this is about the opportunity of drawing down innovations and technology that has been applied to rethink other industries and applying it to healthcare. So it's a combination of informing strategy for IBM around healthcare and applying science and evidence to the work that we do.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. And last but not least, of course, John.
Hey everyone, Jian Yang here. I'm a senior director for digital health at Eli Lilly and Company. I'm a obstetrician by training, and since I was in a med school, I pleasant to hear, a few of us went to that route, and I've been always fascinated by how technology could augment the medicine. Since then, my career has carried me around the world chasing that dream. Right now, I'm leading a cross-disciplinary team inside Eli Lilly, and consists of physicians, biomedical engineers, data scientists, data engineers. Our role is really to help the company reimagine medical treatment. So my team broadly supports 3 pillars of the company. One is really digital therapy for very selected therapeutic areas. And secondly, we are looking broadly at combination therapy. That's really all the medicine we have on the market and see how they can be more effective or more safe. And the third is really how we're reimagining how we can put technology into our clinical studies that really accelerate our drug development.
That's wonderful. All right, fantastic. We're looking forward to hearing more about that as well. So really, just to go back to the topic of the panel, which is around post-COVID-19, is healthcare's new normal digital? And certainly one of the biggest pieces of news while we've been going through this pandemic is the acceleration of telemedicine and then the merger between both Teladoc and Livongo. And Jenny, within that merger, obviously, data is front and center. And that's really critical to how a lot of pandemic-based organizations and post-COVID organizations are thinking. How are your companies using data, and how do they plan on using data post-COVID to better inform a lot of the care decisions in the future, virtual care decisions as well, going forward?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You're right. Data is really underlying, I think, the acceleration of this new model of healthcare, which is a virtual, consumer-centered delivery ecosystem. And the reason that data is so important there is it allows you to do 2 things. One is leverage biometric real-time data and provide nudges or insights directly back to the patient. We call them members, but I was sort of alluding to this in my introduction. When I was first diagnosed with diabetes, I learned very quickly that I'd have to fill out and write all my numbers down and see the doc every 3 months. And so I would just fill them out in the car right before going into the office, sometimes change the pen color and spill a little bit of stuff on the sheet because it was really painful to do it. And you've lost the opportunity to actually influence individual people along the way. And so data allows you to do that in the same way now when you log into Amazon, you'll get recommendations for purchasing. The really exciting other side of the coin is physicians, if you're actually prompted with real-time data around how somebody's doing with some decision support on top of that becomes incredibly powerful to deliver an experience. So imagine as a doc, like you actually know how people are doing because you've seen their metrics, you know what their blood pressure is, what their weight is. You see that every Thursday their blood pressure spikes. You start to focus in on what's happening Thursday right off the bat rather than kind of, walking through trying to collect the data. So it accelerates from an experience standpoint and from an efficiency standpoint. But data truly underlies that platform, and that's really the behind the scenes as we were looking through the merger. Livongo really started from the outside in with digital, driven by data. Teladoc started from the inside out by providing a new service link to providers and patients. If you put data under that core, imagine a world where all of us could be serviced digitally first in there. I'm in my son's bedroom right now because it's 7 a.m. in California. They're out there making breakfast. You can be serviced digitally first where you want. And then if and when you want or need a physician, you can immediately escalate. That is incredibly powerful, but all of that is built on the data platform.
That's spot on. I think that when we look at the development and the evolution of data and of the virtual healthcare system that's been really accelerated, depending on who you talk to, between 5 to 10 to 20 years because of the pandemic, that really has changed the function of digital health and really the urgency of it. And Lisa, a big urgency of what's happening is the ability to utilize platforms like Twitter for real-time communications and really urgent communications. Now during a pandemic, a lot of people are looking at Twitter as a source of information to understand what's happening right in this very instant. And that also includes marketing. How has this kind of pandemic and looking beyond COVID as well, how has social changed the tonality of marketing with life science companies?
Right, that's a great question. So I think, COVID has really flipped marketing on its side, right? It's very difficult to keep up with what brands can do and should be doing. And I think Twitter has definitely been where people are going to find out information. And so whether that's public health officials with different governments, whether that's HCP sharing information, whether that's patients, whether that's just everyday Joes trying to figure out like what are the numbers, what's going on, what's coming next. And that's really stayed the same from when the crisis started to where it is now. And so we've had a lot of work done with our clients around what is the right tonality, because it's changing so quickly. And the one key trend that I'm seeing is that Twitter is really becoming sort of the substitute for the live event. So we have oncology brands doing HCP live stream events on Twitter because they're finding Twitter can most replicate the feeling of an in-person event. We're finding brands clicking into the Emmys, the NFL, all these different things because they want to be present and they want to be aligning with what people care about. But really the only place to do that is Twitter. So I think COVID has really brought forward a very interesting mix of challenges for brands, and it's really changing the options, right, for not only pharma marketers, but marketers everywhere. But I think what's really interesting is from an HCP standpoint, the medical conferences and the virtual conferences, because they're very different than an in-person event. And Twitter is really playing in that space of being that live channel for the virtual piece.
Yeah, I think that, and we're seeing that more and more, certainly every day. And, I know that certainly you talk about healthcare providers and HCPs, and John, you're the Chief Innovation Officer for one of the leading HCPs in the country, and really, in a lot of globally as well. How have you seen patients respond to some of what they see on social and that medium and during the pandemic, and then also following the pandemic? What role is social playing today, and how do you think that'll translate into tomorrow's role for social media and for patient care with HCPs?
I just want to make sure you're saying John, not Gian, so that
John,
just making sure. So yeah, I mean, we have had quite the transformation, and so wearing one of my hats, social media has become this incredible tool over the last 10 years for us to get deep insights about patient symptoms, patient impressions about interventions like vaccines. I mean, we've spent a lot of time actually working on Twitter data, analyzing, using natural language processing, important trends, like for instance, early insights about emerging diseases, and you could track COVID just by mining what people say on Twitter. We can also start to understand sort of what people's perceptions of new interventions like a vaccine. And unfortunately, if you look at those channels, you'll see that acceptance around a vaccine coming up is very low, well below 50% on a vaccine that will likely be released this fall. And then third, you can start to see people's attitudes and beliefs towards their healthcare delivery. And we've done a lot of work looking at how people talk about their health system on Twitter. And in fact, amazingly, you can pick up you can get quite a real-time index of people's healthcare experience just by mining sentiment and the tagging that they make about their health system. And that in itself can help us understand patient experience broadly, but also can inform the way that we want to serve our patients at Boston Children's. And we've spent a lot of time thinking about patient experience and where there's opportunities to supplement that experience with digital tools. The pandemic has clearly had direct impact on delivery. I mean, virtual care being one of those, where we went from, say, 1% of all our visits being virtual to, well over 80%. And now we're in this sort of stable 50% of all visits are now in a virtual setting. That's a challenge, but it also has brought a huge amount of opportunity for us to do the things that we've been setting out for the last decade to implement, whether it's digital intake, a more engaged patient portal, remote patient monitoring, new devices that we can bring to patients, post-discharge engagement and text messages, working with a range of companies like Kairos, Tonic, TytoCare. So it's pushed our envelope to implement things that we only thought were going to take years. So huge amount of silver lining when it comes to what we've been able to experience over the last 6 months.
Yeah, the transformation has been extraordinary, and I think the pain has been extraordinary as well. And it really is something that no one could have predicted. But going from John to Gian, just so that we can put both the like-sounding names next to each other. Gian, I know Eli Lilly has always been one of the leaders in digital health, and now with the pandemic really bringing, for the first month or so, a halt to a lot of clinical trials because of the supply chain disruptions. Now, just in going back and forth with you, it's clear that Lilly is reimagining clinical trials and really thinking about COVID, but also post-COVID, and how to do trials faster, better, cheaper, based on the learnings of the supply chain disruption that have happened. Tell us a little bit about what Eli Lilly is doing today and how it's planning to reimagine these trials in the future.
Thanks, Dan. Great question. I think you're spot on. Lilly, as many other companies, pharmaceutical companies, our clinical study has been significantly disrupted by the current pandemic. Probably not a surprise to anyone. I think there's two parts here. One is really our immediate response, and we have been saying, there's urgent need for us to reimagining how we can conduct trials. On one side, it's really, closely related to COVID-19. You may know, Lilly has a few treatment in the trial page area, and try to see, show the efficacy, etc. And just I think yesterday we showed a positive result from a clinical study that one of our anti-inflammatory drug combined with remdesivir and actually showed positive effect. And we also have antibody treatment, and we, rethinking how we can quickly meet the urgent need. We actually converted or built so-called mobile labs that we actually drove those RVs, converted lab to the nursing home, make sure we can immediately, be close to the patient and meet the demand. So that's kind of immediate response the company has innovated on. On the long term, as we, as my team, help the company really try to reimagining how we can be more efficient, be more digital about our clinical studies. There's a huge trend in the industry currently. We're talking about digital trials. To me, there kind of can be a couple of sense. One is really decentralized trial, where we don't need to keep asking patients to selected clinical sites, and which is obviously not a great patient experience and has a lot of logistic issues. And to the extreme, we're also reimagining maybe we can run virtual trials that really leverage technologies and to make sure we can conduct those studies at the patient's living place, in their house, in their home. Obviously, this cannot be done for all the different therapies, but for selected therapy, I personally really believe we have opportunity there. There are three things we really need to make sure we cover here if we talk about the future of a clinical study. One is obviously, how we can recruit and retain our patient participants. And secondly is really how do we collect data? And the digital give us enormous opportunities to potential to collect more data than we currently could. And we have seen, the mobile health, in this case, we are doing ePro, eCOA that help us, better collect patient information during the trial period. We're also actively looking into the new means of collecting data, sensors, wearables, and those we have seen very promising signals from this. The third is really, I guess, what Jenny and John mentioned, and Lisa, as you did, is really the importance of data science. And when we have the data, we have, especially now, we have enormous amount of data, how we can actually sift through the noise and find the real signal. That requires a lot of advanced analytics, machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. But those, we believe combining all these three things together, and our future clinical studies is going to be much more patient-centric, and they're going to be more effective and efficient, which will be bring meaningful, healthcare, much better healthcare outcome.
That's fantastic. And I think, right now, I think the world, unlike any time, at least in my lifetime, and probably since the really the rapid adoption and diffusion of the smallpox or maybe the polio vaccine in the United States, has not paid attention to clinical trials as much as they've paid attention to clinical trials over the last 8 months, 6 months. It's extraordinary. And obviously IBM being one of the largest companies in the world, IBM being one of the world leaders in technology. Mark, you're the chief medical officer for IBM Watson Health. Tell us what you guys are doing in clinical trials to help innovate in this area.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think our view of the world is that the new normal of healthcare is probably characterized by three things. Well, one is a view of the world that is more personal, targeted against cohorts within a population, targeted against individuals, and indeed targeted in the future around genomes. One that is more participative, so individuals are not viewed as passive recipients of care, but in fact are equal partners in delivery, and in many ways go some way to redefining the social contract of healthcare. I would put it that strongly. I'm sure Jenny would agree. And the third is that it's more integrated. So I think COVID-19 has been an extinction event for siloed thinking in healthcare, and has shaken us out of our traditional boxes, and research and healthcare is a good example of that. So in terms of integration, I think we have established the limitations where research sits separately from the delivery of healthcare, and we now recognize, in the face of a new virus and a new disease, the critical value of integrating research as an integral part of clinical practice. So supplementing traditional randomized controlled trials with real world evidence. And it heralds, I think, an age of collaboration that we have not seen previously. And I might use as an example the UK-based recovery trial. It was a collaboration between Oxford University and a government body, NHS Digital, IBM and Microsoft, and came together, in unprecedented speed to rethink cohort and recruitment into that trial, and remarkably quickly established, with a vision of having almost everyone on COVID on a trial, established dexamethasone's impact on reducing mortality by 30% for ventilated patients. So an enormous impact, and there will be other arms that increase our understanding of this disease over time. So integration and bringing together disparate data sorts that describe our experience not only of illness but also wellness in a variety of ways, in the way that has already been described. So wearables, different settings, a much more eclectic and inclusive view of data, both unstructured and structured, is at the core of us driving the insights that are based around an individual rather than based around an organization, which is our historical way of thinking about healthcare. And the only other thing I would say is the critical value of this emerging theme of a learning healthcare system, where we start to capture in a very structured way the inputs, the outputs, and critically the outcomes, including patient experience, of care, and link those things together. So we start to understand, with clear links to evidence and professional consensus, what the relationships are between unexplained variation, duplication, and gaps in the delivery of care. It is that insight model that is going to help us navigate these kind of choppy waters that we are currently in.
Yeah, and choppy waters is certainly a good way to describe it. It is incredible. And John, you mentioned it earlier, going from 1% virtual visits to 80% to 50%. We're seeing a very interesting evolution of virtual care and really COVID, and beginning to see kind of what the post-COVID strategy may look like for a lot of the virtual visits that are coming down the pipeline for HCPs, for clinical trials, et cetera. And Jenny, along those lines, tell us a little bit about what your customers are telling you, and about a little bit about the platform utilization that Teladoc Livongo is seeing along those lines. And again, for the audience, we're going to start taking questions in about 10 minutes. So please queue up your questions with Kieran from LSX. And again, if you don't get, if we can't get to your questions, please feel free to link us in. All the contestants on this COVID, post-COVID panel have agreed to connect with you on LinkedIn. So we're all looking forward to that as well. But Jenny, going back to that question, what do you feel, what are your customers telling you, and what are you seeing for product, for platform utilization there?
Yeah, I'll start maybe with the inverse order, which is from a product platform utilization. We've all seen a telehealth or virtual care solution spike in the setting of the pandemic. Jason Gorbeck, the CEO of Teladoc, shared on his last earnings call that they saw a spike, but 60% of those calls were for chronic conditions, right? And so like telehealth providers have not only become, I have an ear infection, my kid's screaming, I have this rash, can you take a quick look? It's now kind of become an accepted model. Similarly, at Livongo, we saw a massive influx, particularly in our behavioral health utilization of over, I think 150% utilization. And we're just at the start of that epidemic, as we all know, from a mental health standpoint. Our clients are really asking the same things that they were asking before the pandemic. And those are, what is the experience like for my members or my employees? Are you driving clinical outcomes? And last but not least, are you saving me money? So three key things that people are purchasing on. In many ways, I think from a Livongo standpoint, the pandemic sped up the acceptance of the business model. There are a number of us who've been in this virtual health delivery system. That got sped up as an acceptance, again, because you remember this happened in travel? Like you used to have to go to the travel agent, and all of a sudden they flipped the computer around, and all of a sudden they said, oh my goodness, we can all book our own flights. They made the bet on the person. Very similarly in healthcare, we are delivering a new experience for people that I don't think is going to go away. Our clients understand and ask for that. I spend a lot of my time with clients. I spend a lot of my time with an analyst as a publicly traded company. And I think the disconnect between what the analysts in Wall Street ask around the merger versus what our clients say is really interesting. Our clients really want an integrated experience for their members and their employees from start to finish, whether that's acute, episodic, chronic, across multiple chronic conditions, recognizing for them that it's hard to purchase across multiple solutions, but also probably most importantly, none of us sit in a single solution. You're a person, you can have an acute ear infection, you can have a chronic condition, and so you pull through all of those. And so it's about building an experience that services people where they are and meets them where they are, and then absolutely escalates into the healthcare ecosystem at the appropriate time.
Yeah, I'll just layer into that. I mean, I think it's absolutely, it's going to where people are versus, forcing them to come to us. And yes, we had to do some of this work by necessity, but the patient experience surveys that we're getting are off the charts. I mean, the ability for a parent to do Zoom to their provider for visits that were never necessary to have live in person are just incredible. And so you've already then changed the game dramatically. And what we're excited about is sort of what comes next, right? Because automatically you're in a virtual visit. You know, a lot of our team's work in innovation has been in sort of voice and biomarkers and machine vision. Imagine the kinds of things you can detect by analyzing voice, on top of the fact that you could use that conversation and extract meaningful information and populate an electronic medical record. What are the sort of markers that you could identify just by looking at facial recognition? What, you know, stress levels can you detect on the patient? So on top of the sort of the convenience, it's offering a new avenue for technology to provide sort of some of that value in sort of AI machine learning that we've sort of been held back because of the setting in which care was delivered.
Yeah, that's spot on. And Lisa, from what you're seeing with Twitter and a lot of social channels, you know, what's the future of HCP marketing? You know, we're talking to two people that are in the middle of the HCP universe, Teladoc Livongo, and you know, obviously Boston Children's. So what do you see as how people market using social channels and social functions and platforms like Twitter?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think definitely you're going to see a massive shift to digital for HCP marketing, because getting in to see doctors, that old model is just not working. And I think to what everybody has said here before, there's a lot of changes that have happened as a result of COVID that are going to stay. So there's things we were doing before that are massively inefficient. And now that we've been given the opportunity to make things efficient, people are not going to give time back. So I think that is only going to accelerate. And I think you're going to see, you know, traditionally HCP marketing from a digital standpoint has been very much looking at HCPs and doctors the way like kids look at their elementary school teachers, like they're just a teacher and then they go home and change their clothes and then they come back and they're a teacher again. And I think that's how people look at their doctor, right? They have their white coat, they go home, they go to bed, they put their white coat on, they come back in the morning. And so I think there's this massive opportunity to target HCPs as people. And what we're seeing people start to dig into on Twitter, because Twitter is very much a platform where HCPs are very active. And we're saying to our clients, okay, you want to reach them at ASCO when everybody in the world is trying to reach them and you have no relationship with them. Build your relationship with them beforehand, because you know what? They're also coming to Twitter to watch football and maybe The Bachelor and all different kinds of things. So connect with them as a person so that when they're at ASCO, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that brand, which really isn't dissimilar from marketing in general. But I think we've looked at HCPs as a very siloed population, and all they do and all they think about all day long and all night long is things related to their profession, which is of course absurd. So I think you're going to see that kind of open up, and you're going to see some interesting work as people push those boundaries in the way that happened with DTC, right? I mean, it used to be with DTC, all we did was talk about the symptoms, because that's all, if you were a diabetes patient, that's all you were all day long, as you thought about your diabetes. And what they realize is, no, that person is also a mother, and that person also has a job and all these other things. And if you don't connect with them on different levels, it's not going to be as effective. So I think you're going to see that migration go to the HCPs.
Yeah, and that's something certainly that that a lot of people are thinking about these days with life science companies. And John, when Lilly and Eli Lilly, when you guys are looking at using social channels and ways to communicate with HCPs and clinical trials in differently, how is some of that coming to light, and how are you guys pursuing some of that?
Obviously, we are you know, very actively on all the channels, right? And I agree with all the panelists. We view that COVID-19 is a great accelerator for our digital effort, no matter it's on the R&D side as well as our marketing commercial side. From our stand, you know, as any other pharmaceutical companies, we do want to make sure we also approach this in a very, you know, careful and regulated way, because obviously the industry is you know, has extreme responsibilities to the society. We want to make sure, you know, everything we say publicly, and you know, it has the evidence to back up that. And we internally, you know, have very stringent review process, make sure, you know, the things we communicate scientifically accurate, and really, you know, can help with, you know, make sure, you know, people understand our product in the right way, and the patient can benefit from the product the right way. So in a nutshell, for us, we do believe, the future of digital channel is becoming more and more important, and we have, kind of fully embraced that, and make sure, we fully leverage all the different channels combined. Especially, I agree with everyone, this COVID-19 pandemic situation is going to fundamentally change how every single company, think about how they reach our customers.
That's great. And again, going around the horn on my Zoom screen, Mark, you're up next, and we've got questions coming in from the gallery now, and want to make sure we get to those as well. And Jenny, you're up right after this. People are asking about more big deals coming down the pipeline in digital health. But first, Mark, there's a question from the audience about, and again, this makes sense. This is a global conference. And someone from London wants to know more about what IBM and what's happening with the National Health Service in the UK. Certainly current COVID, but then post-COVID, and how are you seeing some of that develop as well?
Yeah, no, for sure. So what we have seen unprecedented sets of challenges in terms of the challenges of a new disease and a new virus, and we've been kind of actively involved in IBM in supporting the NHS, either through the supply of chatbots, virtual assistants to provide authoritative information to the public around it, supporting vaccine development in the UK, or indeed the recovery trial that I talked about. But actually, one of the most significant things in the NHS has been a sea change attitude in digital transformation and innovation. It's been quite remarkable. So we have seen similar levels in the NHS of adoption of virtual consultations. Most of primary care consultations have shifted now to a virtual platform. Outpatients, ambulatory care is now shifting in the same direction. But let's not kid ourselves that the shift to virtual consultations is digital transformation. We did not transform financial services by giving clients, customers access to the bank manager via a video conferencing call. That industry was transformed by a radical rethink around participation in the way that Jenny's just been talking about. And we shouldn't lose sight of what, John was saying about what comes next. So we've been very actively involved in working with both organizations and areas in rethinking and redesigning pathways of healthcare, particularly thinking not only just on the impact of COVID, but thinking around subsequent waves and impact from a public health perspective. So the delay on services for things like cancer referrals, for things like long-term conditions, and of course the impact on mental health and some of the more societal challenges associated with this virus. It has been fascinating to see the appetite and the attitude to digital transformation becoming unrecognizable from what it was before. And in many ways, this is the perfect time, the perfect storm for a company like IBM to step up to the mark and meet its responsibilities in addressing, the most significant challenges of humanity.
Yeah, extraordinary. And along those lines, aside from really understanding how the NHS is tackling this as well, Jenny, a lot of the audience wants to know about other big mergers and acquisitions and these sorts of transactions occurring in digital healthcare. Obviously, $18+ billion transaction like this was extraordinary in the history of digital health and the history of biomedical informatics, health IT, et cetera. It's one of the largest transactions ever done, whether it's an IPO or whatever. So do you see more of these happening? Do you see more of these, especially it's the end of the year, it's that season, if you will. So what do you see happening in the next 3 months when it comes to digital health and people not only responding to COVID, but also post-COVID?
Yeah, well, I just kind of want to underscore what Mark said, which I think is exactly spot on, which is to revolutionize an industry, you have to rethink the entire experience. And so it's less about will company A form with company B than what does that overarching experience look like. And I think you're getting a sense of it. We're all getting a sense of it from various vantage points that we are revolutionizing this industry, and not just Teladoc Livongo, but the ecosystem is revolutionizing this. And so do I think there'll be more mergers, acquisitions, combinations? Yes, I do. You all probably have some great ideas as to what those might be, but I think it is all in the idea around totally transforming the experience and the care delivery system. And because of COVID, I don't think COVID, again, caused this at all. I think the work was going on. I think COVID just accelerated us by about 3 to 5 years. And this is where we would have been. It is an incredibly exciting time to be here. I think sometimes people ask, like, why now for Livongo and Teladoc? You're both doing so well. And it's because we hit this point 3 years earlier. This is exactly where we were excited for. And we had this chance to revolutionize care delivery, but we all do on the ecosystem here, and we're all play roles in that.
Yeah, that's just enormous. Absolutely. And, again, we've got about 5 minutes left for the audience. If we don't get to your questions, because there are a lot of other questions coming in now, please do reach out to the participants via LinkedIn or Twitter. They've all said that they would love to be able to network with you all. So please feel free to do that. And another question coming in, Lisa, is around, what impact will COVID have on digital health that will be permanent versus what will some of the COVID rollback look like? So how will kind of the Keynesian notion of animal spirits, how will we end up reversing and returning to some of our animal spirits pre-COVID, and what will be permanent? Lisa, what do you think is here to stay from what we're seeing today?
I think the things that are here to stay are the things that make things easier for consumers. I think it's really that simple. I think that they talked a lot about virtual visits that have been incredibly effective and so much easier. I think that will stay. I think that it's, to Jenny's point, it's a tremendous opportunity for anyone in this ecosystem anywhere to accelerate what they're already doing, to make it that way, because this is your chance. And if it's something that is not easier, it will not hold once COVID is behind us. I think from a Twitter standpoint, our usage has exploded. And what we've realized even more so is that our work around brand safety has never been more important. And particularly since it's become such a center for health information, it's so important that misinformation is labeled, that we have invested in automated ways of taking down bots, that we are in putting things on the platform like conversation controls to allow for safe dialogue. So from a Twitter social platform standpoint, I think one of the biggest things we're talking about with our clients is just brand safety. And now that this is where everybody is, and this is where everybody is sharing information, what are you doing to make sure that that is a safe experience? And that's definitely always been a charge at Twitter, but it's really accelerated because now more than ever, we are a public service, and it's super important that people are able to get relevant, up-to-the-minute information, but also that it's correct information.
Yeah, that's spot on.
Super critical.
Yeah, absolutely critical, more now than ever. And with a couple of minutes remaining, John, take us down the stretch here. We've got a question coming in from the galley. What can we do as an ecosystem to help continue the development and the diffusion of telemedicine over the next 5 years, so that we don't see a rollback in virtual care? Obviously, it has a lot to do with a lot of different stakeholders, including government, et cetera. But you're in the front lines there. What do we need to do to maintain what Lisa talked about, which is, some of these new habits and keep them in place?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we are in a new normal. So I do think there's now an expectation on the part of the patients. Just like, Jenny's great example of the travel industry. I think once the cat is out of the bag and you've given sort of the consumer a taste of what it can really be, there's no way. I mean, yes, there are still travel agents out there and people do use them, but I mean, it's very hard to convince someone to to go back. And I think that's ultimately what's going to be. So yes, it's going to be on the health systems themselves to evolve. Some have done a great job. Some are still sort of holding themselves back. The regulatory landscape is absolutely sort of primed to keep this going. I mean, we'll see if there are rollbacks and sort of parity and reimbursement in the US. And rules about licensing requirements across states. I mean, these are all things that we're grappling with to expand our reach digitally. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be driven by what the consumer wants, because they have the choice. And now that they've recognized that, getting a virtual visit with a provider is equivalent and more convenient, I just don't see, it's just going to be now on the health systems to evolve their capability to adapt at this point, or they will no longer exist.
Perfect. And with that, I'm getting the cue from Karen now that we are at our limit. And I want to thank just a tremendous panel. I do have to say I've done this for a long time now. And this is one of the most distinguished panels I've ever seen. Just an extraordinary group of individuals dedicating themselves to improving public health through digital in ways that we're all hoping will be permanent and lasting and improve outcomes, accessibility, and certainly costs. So with that, thank you, Karen and LSX and everyone from LSX for putting this together. And thank you, Lisa, Jenny, Mark, John, and John for your participation, for your time today, for committing to this and amongst a really busy time. And again, for the audience, if we didn't get to your questions, again, feel free to check us all out on LinkedIn and follow up there. Thanks, everyone, and have a safe day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.